The doorbell rang at 11:30 a.m. Two police officers stood on my porch, a tall man with a mustache and a younger woman with her hair pulled back. The male officer asked if I was Mrs. Anastasia Hawkins, and I confirmed. He introduced himself as Officer Dominic Scott and his partner as Officer Paula Haynes, explaining they needed to discuss something important. Inside the living room, they declined my offer of coffee and got straight to the point. They were here about my husband, Marcus. I told them everything was fine, explaining he had just left for work that morning. Officer Paula exchanged glances with her partner before explaining the issue. They'd received a missing person report for Marcus filed by his mother, Cecilia. Missing? That's impossible. He kissed me goodbye at 7:30 this morning. Officer Dominic opened his notepad and explained that according to Cecilia Hawkins, she hadn't heard from her son in 4 days. When she called his workplace yesterday, she was told he hadn't been there all week. That can't be right. Marcus goes to work every day at Meyer & Associates. He's been working on a big project. Paula countered that they had already checked with Meyer & Associates, who confirmed Marcus hadn't been to the office since last Thursday. I tried calling Marcus immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I explained to the officers that there must be some mistake. Marcus had been leaving for work and returning home on his normal schedule, even talking about his workday during dinner. When Dominic asked about the previous day specifically, I described how Marcus came home at 6:15. We ate lasagna, and he mentioned a client meeting running long. Paula asked when I last spoke with my mother-in-law. I told her about Sunday when we were supposed to have dinner at her house, but Marcus said she canceled due to not feeling well. Paula informed me that according to Cecilia, that dinner was never scheduled, which left me confused. The officers asked to look around, and I showed them our bedroom, including Marcus's toothbrush and clothes. When Paula asked about his passport, I opened the desk drawer where we kept important documents. The passport and birth certificate were both missing, though I explained they had been there just last week when I paid the bills. After a radio call, Dominic told me another officer had spoken with our neighbor Christian Rogers, who had seen Marcus loading bags into his car last Thursday afternoon. When I protested that was impossible because he was at work, Dominic insisted the neighbor was certain about seeing him at 1 p.m. on Thursday. I called Marcus's office and asked for his assistant, Kimberly. She sounded surprised to hear from me and revealed Marcus hadn't been in since requesting personal leave the previous Wednesday for a family emergency. Officer Dominic began suggesting they needed to check financial records, carefully approaching what he was implying. "You think he left me? That's ridiculous. We've been married for 6 years. Everything's fine between us." I checked our joint bank account on my phone and saw the balance was only $843. Last week, it had over $32,000, our savings for a house down payment. I showed them a transaction from Thursday. $31,500 transferred to an unknown account. "There must be a mistake," I whispered. Our credit card statements showed purchases at a luggage store, Men's Warehouse, and a rideshare to the airport in the days before he disappeared. Dominic asked if Marcus had family in other states or friends abroad. I mentioned his college roommate in Costa Rica, whom Marcus had visited last year. Paula noted they would need that contact information. After the officers left, my friend Kimberly rushed over. She gently asked if Marcus had said anything unusual lately. I told her he had mentioned a promotion coming up and that we'd soon be able to afford the house in Oak Ridge. "Anna, Marcus was laid off from Meyer 3 months ago. Everyone knew. We thought you did too." That night, I searched our closet thoroughly and found a prepaid phone hidden in an old suitcase. It was password protected, so I had to take it to specialists to get it unlocked. The call history showed dozens of calls to and from the same number. The most recent text read, "Flight confirmed. Meet you there tomorrow." 2 days later, Officer Paula called to inform me they'd confirmed Marcus had boarded a flight to San Jose, Costa Rica, and he hadn't been alone. First update, posted 5 days later. So yeah, my husband abandoned me and flew to Costa Rica with apparently someone else and drained our entire savings account. And honestly, I'm still processing the absolute audacity of this man. For those who saw my first post, thank you for all the messages. Some of you called this from the beginning, and I wish I'd listened to my gut months ago when things started feeling off. The day after Officer Paula told me about the flight, I tried calling Marcus probably 50 times. Every single call went to voicemail. I left messages that started out confused and hurt, then got progressively angrier. By message number 30, I was screaming into the phone about what a coward he was for not even having the balls to tell me to my face. Nothing. Radio silence. Then his mother Cecilia called me. She wanted to know if the police had found Marcus yet, and I told her they had. He was in Costa Rica living his best life, apparently. She acted all shocked and upset, asking if I was sure, if maybe there was some mistake. I asked her point blank why she filed that missing person report when she knew something was wrong, and she got all defensive saying she was just worried about her son. I told her worried mothers don't wait 4 days to report their adult sons missing when they talk to them regularly. She went quiet for a second, then admitted Marcus had called her last Wednesday night and told her he was leaving me, but made her promise not to say anything. He told her I'd been difficult lately, and he needed space to think things through, and he'd call her once he got settled. I lost it. I told her she sat there and watched the police come to my house, watched me discover my husband had stolen everything we had, and she knew the whole time. She started crying, saying Marcus told her it was complicated, that there were issues in our marriage she didn't know about, and she didn't want to get involved. I asked her what issues exactly, because our marriage was fine, until I found out he'd been unemployed and lying to me for 3 months. That shut her up real fast. She didn't know about the job. Marcus told her he got a promotion and was taking a sabbatical to celebrate. She actually believed he earned that money somehow. We met at a Panera near her house 2 days later because she insisted we needed to talk in person. She looked terrible. Hadn't slept, mascara smudged, the whole thing. She kept saying she didn't know Marcus would do this, that he'd always been such a good boy, that something must have happened to change him. I laid it out for her. Marcus was laid off in July. For 3 solid months, he got up every morning, put on a suit, and pretended to go to work. He came home at normal times. He talked about projects and meetings and clients that didn't exist. He stole our entire savings, money I'd been putting away since before we even got married, and used it to fund whatever life he's building in Costa Rica, with whoever he took with him. Cecilia kept insisting there had to be an explanation. Maybe he was depressed. Maybe he had a breakdown. I told her depressed people don't book flights and buy new luggage and carefully plan their escape over multiple days. This was calculated. Then she hit me with something that made my blood boil even more. She said Marcus had called her yesterday morning from Costa Rica. He told her he was safe, that he was sorry for worrying her, and that he'd explain everything soon. When she asked about me, he said I'd be fine and that we'd grown apart. Grown apart. This man kissed me goodbye every morning, told me he loved me, made plans for our future house in Oak Ridge, and apparently we'd grown apart, and I just didn't notice. I asked Cecilia for the number he called from. She said it was blocked. Of course it was. The bank situation is a whole nightmare. I went to our bank branch on Friday and met with this manager named Adam, who looked about 12 years old and kept apologizing like it was his fault. He pulled up all our account activity and showed me everything. Marcus had been slowly moving smaller amounts to a new account he opened in August, just his name on it. The big transfer happened Thursday morning at 9:47 a.m. while I was at work. Adam said since it was a joint account and Marcus was an authorized user, technically he didn't steal anything. It was legal for him to take it all. I asked about the credit cards. Same thing. We were both authorized users, so even though he maxed them out buying his escape supplies, there was nothing illegal about it. I called a lawyer that same afternoon. Her name is Lucy, and she was recommended by Kimberly. Lucy said I could file for divorce and try to get some of the money back through asset division, but if Marcus spent it all already, there might not be anything left to recover. She said my best shot was to freeze everything immediately and document all his purchases, which I'd already done. I started going through literally everything in our apartment, every drawer, every box, every random piece of paper. In his car, which he left here by the way because apparently he didn't need it for his new life, I found insurance paperwork for a storage unit I didn't know we had. The storage place is one of those 24-hour facilities on the edge of town. I drove there Saturday night because I couldn't sleep and couldn't stop thinking about what else he'd been hiding. Used the code from the paperwork and found Unit 247. It was almost completely empty. Just some old furniture from his college apartment and a couple boxes of random junk. But in the back corner, I found a folder with printed emails. Yes, printed, like he was worried about digital trails or something. They were between Marcus and someone named MJ, going back 6 months. The emails were vague but clearly romantic. Lots of can't wait to see you, and this will all be worth it, and just a few more months. The last email was from 3 weeks ago. MJ wrote that they'd secured the apartment and the deposit was paid. Everything was ready. Marcus replied that he'd handle the finances and they'd be out of here by November. MJ. I don't even know if that's a man or woman. The email address was just a random Gmail with numbers. I also found a receipt from a jeweler dated September 15th for $3,200. A ring. He bought someone a $3,000 ring while we were supposed to be saving for a house. When I confronted Kimberly about whether she knew anything about Marcus seeing someone, she admitted that people at the office had noticed him texting a lot in his last few weeks there, always smiling at his phone. One of the other guys, Brendan, saw him having lunch with a woman in June, but Brendan figured it was a client or something. I asked Kimberly why nobody told me any of this. She said they thought I knew about the layoff and just didn't want to talk about it. And the woman thing was just gossip they weren't sure about. Everyone assumed we were handling it privately. My sister Maria finally came up from Portland yesterday. I'd been putting off telling her the whole story because I knew she'd drive straight here and she's 8 months pregnant and shouldn't be dealing with my drama. But she found out anyway through Mom and showed up at my door with overnight bags and this look on her face like she was ready to commit murder. We spent 4 hours going through everything I'd found. Maria wanted to fly to Costa Rica herself and drag Marcus back by his hair. She kept saying she never liked him, which isn't true, but I appreciated the solidarity. She also said something that's been stuck in my head. She asked why Marcus went through all this elaborate planning and sneaking around instead of just divorcing me if he wanted out. That's what I can't figure out. Why the performance? Why keep pretending everything was fine? Why not just leave? Maria thinks he was waiting for something specific, some piece to fall into place. She thinks 3 months of pretending to go to work wasn't about hiding from me. It was about having time to set up his new life without me questioning where he was or what he was doing. I've been trying to figure out who MJ is. I went through Marcus's social media, his old yearbooks, even his college alumni directory. Nobody with those initials that would make sense. I asked Cecilia if Marcus had mentioned any new friends lately. She said no, but she also didn't know her son was unemployed and planning to flee the country, so her information isn't exactly reliable. The worst part is lying in bed at night in the apartment we shared and realizing I don't actually know who I was married to. The Marcus I thought I knew would never do this. That Marcus was responsible and honest and would talk through problems instead of running away. But that Marcus never existed, did he? This is who he actually is. A person who can look you in the eye every single day while actively destroying your life. I called Meyer and Associates again and talked to his old boss, Christian. Christian said Marcus's layoff was performance-based, which was corporate speak for he screwed something up badly. When I pushed for details, Christian said he couldn't discuss personnel matters, but he did say Marcus took it really hard and seemed shocked when it happened. So maybe that's it. Maybe Marcus couldn't handle the failure, and instead of dealing with it like an adult, he decided to burn everything down and start over somewhere else with someone new who doesn't know he's a liar and a thief. I still have that prepaid phone. Lucy said to keep it as evidence. I've been staring at it for days, at those text messages that are so casual and loving, like stealing someone's entire life savings and abandoning them is just a minor inconvenience on the way to paradise. The phone number that texted him has a US area code. I looked it up, it's from Seattle. So MJ was here, somewhere in Washington, planning this whole thing with him. I tried calling it yesterday from a blocked number. It rang 4 times and someone picked up but didn't say anything. I could hear breathing and background noise that sounded like waves or wind. Then they hung up. When I called back, the number was disconnected. Final update, posted 3 weeks later. Okay, so this is going to be long, and honestly, I'm still processing half of it. But for everyone who's been following this train wreck, Marcus finally contacted me. And when I say the audacity of this man, I mean it broke into entirely new territory of shamelessness. But let me back up because a lot happened between my last update and now. And some of you guessed parts of this correctly, which is both impressive and depressing. 2 days after my last post, Lucy called to tell me she'd filed the divorce papers, and we needed to serve Marcus. Problem was, we had no actual address for him in Costa Rica, just knew he was there somewhere. She said we could serve him through publication if he stayed missing long enough, but that would take months. I told her to file anyway, and we'd figure out the serving part later. That same week, Maria went into labor early and had the baby, a girl. They named her Sophie. I drove down to Portland and spent 3 days at the hospital with her and her husband Fergus. Holding that tiny baby while my own life was falling apart was surreal. Maria kept apologizing for the timing, like she could control when her daughter decided to arrive. And I kept telling her this was exactly the distraction I needed. While I was in Portland, Cecilia called me 6 times. I finally answered on the 7th call because Maria said I needed to deal with her eventually. Cecilia wanted to meet again, said she had information about Marcus that I needed to hear. I told her unless that information included his exact address in Costa Rica and a pile of my money, I wasn't interested. She said Marcus had called her again and admitted some things. She wouldn't tell me over the phone, insisted it had to be in person. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at this diner near my apartment when I got back to Seattle. The diner meeting was uncomfortable as hell. Cecilia looked worse than last time, and she'd brought this whole folder of papers like she was presenting evidence at trial. She told me Marcus called her crying 2 nights before, saying he'd made a huge mistake and didn't know how to fix it. I asked her what exactly the mistake was, stealing my money, lying for months, or abandoning his marriage, because from where I sat, he'd made several. She said Marcus admitted he'd been seeing someone he met online. When he lost his job, he spiraled and convinced himself his entire life here was a failure, and this other person represented a fresh start. The person's name is Madison Jimenez, a woman, which honestly I'd figured out already, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch. Cecilia said Madison lives in Seattle, and they met through some online gaming community Marcus had joined last year. I didn't even know Marcus played online games. I asked Cecilia why she was telling me this now, and she got all defensive, saying she thought I deserved to know the truth. I told her the truth would have been helpful 3 weeks ago when the police were at my door. She started crying, saying Marcus was her son, and she didn't know what to do. She was caught between us. I told her there was no between us anymore. Marcus made his choice when he drained our bank account and flew to another country. She could be on his side if she wanted, but I was done pretending we were all going to work this out like one big happy family. Then she hit me with something that actually made me pause. She said Marcus wanted to talk to me, that he'd asked her to set up a phone call. He apparently didn't want to contact me directly because he was afraid I'd, and I quote, react badly. I lost it right there in the diner. I told Cecilia that Marcus stole everything I had, made me look like an idiot, and abandoned me without a word, and he was worried about me reacting badly. She tried to calm me down, but I was so far past calm. I told her to give Marcus my number. Oh wait, he already had my number. He'd just been too much of a coward to use it. I left the diner, got in my car, and sat there shaking for 20 minutes. Then I called Lucy and told her about the Madison Jimenez name. She said she'd look into it for the asset division case. Marcus called me 4 days later. Unknown number, which I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. His voice sounded exactly the same, and that somehow made it worse. He started with how sorry he was, how he never meant for things to happen this way. I cut him off and asked him which things exactly, the cheating, the stealing, or the abandoning. He got quiet, then said it was all more complicated than I understood. I told him to uncomplicate it for me then. Right now. He started rambling about how losing his job destroyed him, how he felt like such a failure, how he couldn't face me every day knowing he'd let me down. He said Madison understood what he was going through because she'd gone through something similar, and talking to her made him feel like himself again. Over time, they developed feelings. And when she suggested they start over together somewhere new, it felt like the only way out. I asked him why he didn't just tell me any of this. Why the months of lying, the elaborate charade, the theft? He said he tried to tell me so many times but chickened out because he knew it would hurt me. And the longer it went on, the harder it got. He said he took the money because he figured we'd split it in the divorce anyway, and he needed it to start his new life. That's when I completely snapped. I told him that money wasn't ours anymore. It was mine, my savings from before we even got married. Money I'd earned and saved while he was apparently playing video games with his girlfriend. He tried to argue that joint account meant joint money, and I screamed at him that joint meant we decided together, not that he got to steal it while I was at work. He said he'd pay me back eventually, once he got settled and found work in Costa Rica. I asked him how long eventually was supposed to take, and he admitted he didn't know, maybe a year or two. I told him I wanted every penny back now, and he said he didn't have it anymore. Most of it went to the apartment deposit, new furniture, Madison's credit card debt that they'd paid off so she could come with him, Madison's credit card debt. He used my money to pay off his girlfriend's debts. I asked him how much of my money he had left. He said about $4,000. Out of $31,000, he had $4,000 left after 3 weeks. The conversation went on for almost an hour. He kept trying to justify everything, saying he'd been depressed and not thinking clearly, that he'd never meant to hurt me this badly. I asked about the ring I found the receipt for, and he admitted he'd bought Madison an engagement ring in September. They were planning to get married once our divorce was final. So he was engaged to someone else while still married to me, using money we'd saved for our house to buy her a ring. At one point, he tried to say we'd grown apart anyway over the past year, that I'd been distant and focused on work. I reminded him that I'd been working extra hours specifically to save more money for the house he kept saying he wanted. He went quiet again. I asked him point blank why he did it this way. Why not just file for divorce, split things properly, and leave? Why the performance? He finally admitted the truth. He didn't think he could get away with taking all the money in a normal divorce. He knew I'd fight him on it, that my lawyer would make sure everything was split fairly. This way, by the time I realized what happened, he'd be gone and the money would be spent. He gambled that I wouldn't be able to get it back from Costa Rica. Hearing him actually say it out loud, admit that he'd deliberately planned to screw me over, was somehow worse than discovering it on my own. This wasn't a spontaneous mistake or a moment of weakness. He'd calculated the best way to rob me and get away with it. I told him I'd filed for divorce and he'd be hearing from my lawyer. He asked if there was any way we could settle this privately, keep the lawyers out of it. I asked him why I would do him any favors when he'd spent the last 4 months ruining my life. He said because we'd loved each other once, because we'd been happy, because I was a good person who'd want to do the right thing. The manipulation, like I was supposed to roll over and make things easy for him after everything he'd done. I told him the right thing would be him getting on a plane, coming back to Seattle, and facing the consequences of his actions like an adult. He said he couldn't do that. His life was in Costa Rica now with Madison. I asked if Madison knew he was still legally married, and he said yes, she knew everything and supported his decision to leave. I hung up on him. I couldn't listen to another word. Lucy was thrilled when I told her about the call. Apparently him admitting to deliberately hiding assets and planning to keep them from me was exactly what she needed. She said it probably wouldn't get all my money back, but it strengthened our case significantly. She also found Madison Jimenez's social media through some legal databases she had access to. Madison is 29, and based on her Instagram, had been posting photos from Costa Rica for the past 2 weeks. Beach sunsets, tropical drinks, her and Marcus looking disgustingly happy together. In one photo from last week, you could see the ring on her finger. Seeing them together, seeing how happy they looked while I was here dealing with the wreckage of my life, made me physically sick. Maria said I should stop looking at the pictures, that I was torturing myself, but I couldn't. I needed to see it, needed to understand who this person was that my husband had chosen over me. Based on what I could piece together from Madison's old posts, she'd been going through a divorce of her own when she met Marcus. Her ex-husband was some guy who'd cheated on her, and she'd been pretty open online about how devastating it was. So she knew what betrayal felt like, and she still helped Marcus do the exact same thing to me. I found her ex-husband's profile too. He'd commented on some of her old posts. His name is Brendan, and curiosity got the better of me. I sent him a message explaining who I was and what had happened. I didn't expect a response, but I got one within an hour. Brendan and I ended up talking on the phone for 2 hours. His divorce from Madison had been finalized in March, right around when she apparently met Marcus. He said Madison had a pattern of jumping into new relationships fast, that she needed constant validation and attention. When their marriage fell apart, she'd immediately started dating someone new, and Brendan figured this Marcus guy was just the next in line. He also told me something interesting. Madison had terrible credit and a lot of debt from their marriage. She'd maxed out credit cards trying to start a business that failed, and in their divorce settlement, she'd taken on most of that debt. He said she was always looking for someone to rescue her financially. Suddenly, Marcus's story about paying off her credit card debt made a lot more sense. Madison hadn't just been his emotional support. She'd needed his money. My money. He told me Madison's parents had disowned her over the way she handled their divorce, and she'd been pretty isolated before meeting Marcus. The divorce is moving forward slowly. Lucy says it'll take months, maybe longer since Marcus is in another country. She's working on getting his wages garnished once he finds work, and trying to freeze any assets he might have through legal channels. It's complicated and frustrating and expensive. Cecilia called again last week. She said Marcus had asked her to tell me he was sorry, that he hoped someday I could forgive him. I told her I didn't want his apologies through intermediaries. If he was actually sorry, he could wire back my money and stop hiding in Costa Rica. She said he was trying to build a life there and couldn't just abandon everything. I also told Cecilia that she needed to decide whose side she was on, because I was tired of her playing messenger between us. Either she was going to support what her son did, or she was going to acknowledge that he destroyed my life and stole from me. She couldn't do both. She got upset and said I was being unfair, that she was trying to help everyone. I told her there was no helping everyone in this situation. Marcus made his choice, and she needed to make hers. She said she'd always love her son, no matter what he did. I told her that was fine, but don't expect me to keep talking to her then. We haven't spoken since. My apartment lease is up in 2 months and I'm not renewing. Too many memories here. Plus, I can't afford it on my own anyway. Maria offered to let me stay with them for a while, but I think I need my own space. I've been looking at smaller studios closer to my work. I keep going back through our relationship trying to figure out what was real and what was performance. Did he ever actually love me? Was our entire marriage just convenient until something better came along? Brendan says I'll drive myself crazy thinking like that. And he's probably right. He said he spent months doing the same thing with Madison before he realized it didn't matter. Whatever truth was there got buried under so many lies that it was impossible to excavate. I asked Brendan if he'd known Madison was seeing someone new. He said he'd suspected based on her social media activity but hadn't known who until I reached out. He said Madison had a habit of rewriting history, making her current relationship seem like true love, and her past relationships seem like horrible mistakes. He warned me that she was probably painting Marcus as her savior right now, the man who rescued her from her terrible life. But here's what I keep coming back to. Marcus could have divorced me honorably. He could have been honest about losing his job, about falling for someone else, about wanting out of our marriage. It would have sucked and hurt and been awful, but it would have been real. Instead, he chose to lie and steal and manipulate, and that says everything about who he actually is. I don't want him back. I don't forgive him. I don't wish him well. I hope his life in Costa Rica falls apart spectacularly. I hope Madison runs through whatever money he has left and leaves him for someone else. I hope he ends up alone and broke and realizes way too late what he threw away. Lucy says we should have a settlement offer in the next month or 2. Marcus will probably try to negotiate paying me back in installments or some other garbage. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. Marcus is Madison's problem now, and God help her when she realizes who she actually ended up with.